that distinct sound, that distinct smell. There's only one Zippo, but there are many stories. This one is mine. This is my grandfather's lighter, Edward Zalva. Doesn't have that distinct sound anymore because it's so old. Still works great, still has a great flame. My grandfather was the son of a Cuban immigrant. He was born in Ybor City. He was born 2.5 pounds. The midwife told his mother when he was born, put him in a shoebox underneath the bed because he's not going to make it through the night. I'm thankful she didn't. My grandfather did live through the night. He became a deputy sheriff for Hillsborough County. He married his wife Margaret Zalva. Together they had 3 boys. Eddie, his son, Nelson, my father, and Ronald, my other uncle. Eddie had a son and a daughter. My father had 2 sons, myself and my brother David. And Ronnie had 3 boys, RJ, Chad, and Neil. So I'm very thankful that my grandfather lived, that his mother decided to keep him instead of putting him in a shoebox underneath the bed. And my grandmother worked for her uncle who owned a cigar factory, who was so cheap that when they would go to a family event, he would take the cigars out of his pocket, break them off, break them in half, and throw them at the entrance to the door so no one would ask him for a cigar. It's pretty cheap. I remember going to my grandparents' house. We practically grew up there. That was our second home. Grandma and Grandpa took care of us when my parents couldn't. When my father had cancer, we stayed there a lot. But growing up in a Cuban household is a lot of food. My grandmother always said, eat more, honey, you're too skinny. You can't tell a Cuban grandmother no. And plus they grew up during the Depression era, so they want to make sure you're well fed. I remember going to my grandparents' house, and of course the back room where my grandfather sat and watched his TV always smelled like smoke. He always had his Zippos overfilled to where I remember opening up and lighting it, and the flame was always just so big. At least it seemed bigger as a kid. And then he had the old cigar cutters. He would say, hey, put your finger in it, and try and get me to cut my finger off. Just a sense of humor. But he had this huge Zenith TV, if you all remember, the big Zenith floor mount TVs. They sat on the floor. And it was broken. It didn't work. So he had another TV sitting on top of it. And to the side of that were multiple stacks of VHS tapes of just movies he would record off HBO and Cinemax or whatever. He had everything. In the back of his house, he had this table, real solid concrete table with Spanish tile inlaid in the top, and seats that went around it that were also concrete cement with cement Spanish tiles inlaid in it. It was beautiful, and it was a gift, I guess. But you couldn't move the thing; it was so heavy. And then he had the Ybor City house in the back. It was just a shed, a tinkering shed. I remember my brother and I going in there, and above the door there was a picture of a topless woman with big breasts. And as a kid, that's always exciting when you see that, of course. And he had all these little gadgets in there. He'd fixed radios, and he had some type of electrical thing set up to where my brother always get me to grab both ends and it would electrocute me. So he had current run through it. I don't know what he was doing, if it was something to test, but It's probably not a good idea to have electricity flowing through my body, but it didn't kill me, which is good. My grandfather was a neat old man. He'd always say, "The kids of today know nothing." And then he would also call me Comamieta. And if you're Cuban, you know what that means. But it's funny. I remember one time I told my grandfather I owed my father money. And my grandfather looked at me, he goes, "What do you owe him money for?" I said, "Well, Grandpa, he's helped me out a lot, you know." He goes, "You don't owe him nothing." He says, "When he pays me back, then you worry about paying him back." My grandfather was quite the character. Always smoked cigars. Even after he had his stroke, he would still smoke cigars. And everyone was trying to tell him to stop, and the doctor said, "He's 89 years old. He's going to smoke cigars. Just let him smoke his cigars." My grandfather died at 89 years old. Still had a full head of hair. Fiery old man. What a great guy. When you smoke a cigar with my grandfather, you could never smoke it halfway or 3/4. You had to get it all the way down to the cavito, to where you had to hold it and pinch it with your fingers to get every last bit of it. Otherwise, you're wasting a cigar. To this day, I still do that. And he always lit cigars with a Zippo. A lot of cigar connoisseurs will say, never use a Zippo, because the fuel taints the smell. Listen, the first puff, maybe second, who cares? Let me tell you something about these Zippos. They've been around a long time. I've never once had a Zippo fail me. If it didn't work because the flint was out, I put a new flint in. If I'd pull the wick up or replace the wick, I did. They have a lifetime warranty. I've never had to send a Zippo back. I've yet to have a torch lighter last me past 2 years. Why do I use a Zippo? Because that's what my grandfather used. I love my abuelo. I learned a lot from that old man. And I'll be passing my Zippos down to my son. And I'm sure my son will be using Zippos just like my grandfather did. And his father. I'm Jason, and that's one of my Zippo stories. Good night.